coming at you from Miami. Buckle up and get ready for a wild ride. Today, we're diving into the Jaguar XK8, completely unfiltered and straight to the point.
Hey, baby.
While some might swear by its luxurious design, others criticize the reliability issues. Love it or hate it, the Jaguar XK8 stands out wherever you go. So in this video, I'm gonna explore both the good and the bad of this car from my personal experiences with the Jaguar XK8, which I know very, very well. I've owned and worked on my own XK8s for the past 15 years. I've had every single variation of the car. And forgetting the hype, there is just one thing that really affects the XK8, and this one thing is the reason most of them have low miles, people are not driving them, and when you see test drive reviews by reviewers that really haven't owned one, they sometimes get mixed reviews. Let's dive in. The XK8 is the high point of the Jaguar lineup, and as a matter of fact, in all of Jaguar's history. This is the car that Jaguar truly got right.
That's what it's all about, really, with cars like this. Excitement.
Yes, some might look cooler in pictures, but as far as owning them, driving them day to day, this is the one to get. Now, it's not all the land of milk and honey with this car. There are some things on these cars, and a lot of what you've heard actually have happened to me on my first one. The early cars have plastic chain tensioners. You could really hear them when you turn on the car, you hear plop, 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 and then it kind of goes away, like slapping of the chain. Now, these are the plastic chain tensioners that are not keeping the chain in tension. So what happens is the chain is kind of loose, specifically when you start up the car. When you start up the car, you can really hear them if the chain tensioners are going. The good thing is that this is very easy to replace. You don't have to pull the engine, you don't have to take off the hood. It's easily accessible, and there's a lot of how-tos on how to do this. The parts are very cheap, especially relative to similar cars, and once you upgrade the plastic chain tensioners, you really don't have to think about it ever again. Another thing, the water pump housing. Now, this might have affected my cars more than your cars because I live in Miami and I was daily driving XK8s, but this plastic water pump housing sucks. The good thing is that they have metal ones, and a newbie can definitely change it out. Most of them that I've seen for sale still have the plastic one, so it might be something that mainly happened to me because I live in Miami and it's super hot over here, so the car is under more extreme temperatures. But it's good to go ahead and swap out these plastic housings just because they don't hold up under extreme daily driving conditions, especially in hot weather. Another thing that's not so good, as a matter of fact it's horrible, is the ignition coils on these cars go. They don't last. I don't know if it's the heat under the engine. From what I've seen, the heat under the engine is actually not that much, but the good thing is that these cars are super easy to go ahead and replace these coils, as it is with spark plugs. You can get the coils almost anywhere. You can upgrade the coils, and these coils should be changed before you get a check engine restricted performance sign. Believe me, it'll save you a lot of headaches. If you have a car that you don't know when it was really changed, swap it out, because I would say 90% of the performance issues with these cars are the coils. Sometimes the coils will kind of go, or they'll be misfiring, or they'll work in the morning and not work in the afternoon, and you'll be hunting gremlins left and right. And what it really is at the end of the day is just the coils are going. You might take it to a mechanic. The mechanic might have a headache figuring it out. It's better just to swap out all 8 coils and release that from your brain. Believe me, it's totally worth it. Another thing is that the transmissions on the early cars go. Now, this is not a myth. This is actually true because it happened to me. It just went out of the blue. And now this doesn't happen on the XKR transmissions or the newer 6-speed cars. To prevent this, there is a valve modification that you can do to go ahead and remove some of the pressure that seems to affect the drum apart inside. By releasing this pressure, which I believe 2001 had it done from the factory, you can essentially get rid of all these problems. Now, as things are, most of these cars have not had this modification. So keep this in mind if you're searching for one of these cars. You've got the newer 6-speed, which have bulletproof transmissions. You've got the earlier XKRs, which also have the Mercedes bulletproof transmissions. And you've got the earlier cars with transmissions that can go at any time. As a matter of fact, they went on me without any warning, which is not good. Now let's move on to the best, the good, the really good. These cars are reliable. I've daily driven Jaguar XK8s for the past 15 years, and these cars are daily drivable. As a matter of fact, they're a pleasure just to be sitting in traffic in. So even though I've owned a couple crazy cars, I would always go back to the XK8 and XKRs as daily drivers, just because they're so comfortable. You don't have to think about it. You just put in the key and you go. Now, mind you, they're not Toyota reliable. Some things do pop up here and there, but it's nothing like any of the equivalent exotics that came out at the time. It's kind of like a zero drama car. You just put in the key and you go. Another big plus with the Jaguar XK8 is that the electronics are all Ford. You remove the cluster, printed right on the cluster, it says Ford. The gauge cluster is very similar to what you would find on a Ford Focus. They're that that simple. And like that throughout most of the car, mostly all Ford parts throughout the entire car. A lot of people might say, whoa, you have a Ford part in a Jaguar, but I love it. This was a time when Ford owned Jaguar, and this is part of the reason why these cars are so reliable. You don't have to worry about the old phantoms that used to happen with Jaguars. These are daily drivers. Another thing, the convertible tops are essentially for life. They do not shrink with heat. Even here in Miami, if they fade, you can refinish them. Yes, you gotta service the hydraulics that move the top up and down, but that's a maintenance item. It's a non-factor. The biggest factor is that these tops last forever unless abused or you try to clean them too hard and then you mess up the fabric. If taken care of, the tops remain in incredible condition even after years and years of sun beating down on them. Another thing, the engines last virtually forever. Now you might be thinking to yourself, I see a lot of these cars parked and I see a lot of them with so low miles. It's kind of like, I don't know what's going on with these engines. How long can they really last? Well, if you just look at the early Jaguar S-Type and the Lincoln LS, it has the same basic engine without the extras. Those cars regularly do 200,000 and 300,000 miles. Most XK8 will actually also have those miles except for one thing. More on that towards the end of the video. So the engines last forever. Routine maintenance, coils, tensioners, basic things that are considered maintenance, and the engine is good to go. Another great thing about the XK8, it is the interiors, but it's not what you think. Virtually every single review that I've seen on these cars, it's incredible. Everybody gets it wrong. What do I mean?
You got a lot of leather and fine wood in here. Not as much plastic as you might expect, especially for a 90s car. That was sort of the thing of the 90s, throwing plastic into vehicles, but this is mostly leather, wood. This was a big deal car for Jaguar, and so they made it a big deal in the interior.
The interior is mostly vinyl and plastic. You see that beautiful dashboard? It's all vinyl and plastic. You see that beautiful center console with that French stitching? It's all vinyl. You see the entire rear seats. The only pieces of leather in the rear seats is the center section. You see this door panel? The only piece of leather is that strip that you lay your hand on. The rest is all vinyl. 99.9% of the interior on these cars, it is vinyl, which I love. You really don't have to do hardly any restoration on these cars. You could leave them with the top down and not have to worry about shrinking of the leather, about the dashboard cracking, nothing. I mean, you can literally leave it with the top down and not have to think about any of that. These cars being this old, one of the main things you start thinking about is restoration. Am I gonna have to go ahead and restore this interior? No, you don't. Refinish it. There's a lot of products to go ahead and refinish these interiors to make them brand new, and they look actually brand new because the interior has not disintegrated, the dashboard's not cracked, the center console looks good, the back seats, even if it goes through a hurricane, it looks perfect. So the interiors are unbelievably durable, and if you buy one now, it's probably gonna look about the same in about 20 years. Now, what is the biggest issue that happens to every single one of these cars without exception, and it is their biggest problem, and it will likely always be their biggest problem until somebody designs a part that really addresses this issue, and it is the front suspension bushings. These front suspension bushings are terrible, and as a matter of fact, it is the #1 reason why most of these cars have such low mileage. What do I mean? Virtually every single XK8 that is on the market now has bushings that are already failing or have completely already failed. Almost failing looks like the car has a collapsed front suspension like this. This car has a collapsed front suspension, is probably not clunking, but the front suspension is completely collapsed. And so what happens when you have a car in this condition and you keep driving it? Well, eventually you're gonna get full-blown clunking as you go down the road, but most importantly is that the car is not enjoyable, because even if you replace this part with a brand new part, it lasts maybe 10-12,000 miles until you have to replace it again, and it's actually working perfectly for maybe 3, 4, 5,000 miles. So you have a period of about 5 to 6, 7,000 miles where it's too early to still replace it, but the car is not driving good. It feels rough. What's really going on here is that from foam bushing is not working as it should anymore. When you put fresh bushings on this car, it drives brand new, super smooth, super tight, but that lasts only a couple thousand miles until inevitably the bumps start feeling a little bit too much and you just park the car, and that's what happens. These cars get parked because of the front suspension. This is the reason that these cars are changing hands over and over again and the miles stay low. It's not because of the transmissions, the engines, or anything else. These are daily driving cars. I've changed these bushings on every single XK8 and XKR that I've had to swap it. It is incredible. Once replaced, the car drives brand new. If you have bigger wheel gaps in the back than in the front, your suspension is gone. It's time to get in there and put it right again. Yes, you can do something about it. It's not the end of the world. Now, what to look for in these cars when you're buying them? I would try to find the lowest, nicest car that you can possibly find. Now, besides mileage, I would go for the XKR. There is virtually no difference in maintenance or in fuel economy. The engines are not more stressed, the transmissions are beefed up on the earlier 5-speed cars, so you don't have to worry about the tranny ever going. And as a matter of fact, what I've seen in prices, the price difference in the used car market is actually not that much. The market seems to be valuing more lower mileage versus the spec of the car. So if you find a low mileage XKR, jump on the XKR versus the XK8. You're not going to be spending a lot more money on the XKR versus the XK8, and you have the bigger brakes and the engine with a lot more power. Now, coupes versus convertibles is interesting because everybody wants the coupe.
This is the ultimate car.
But are the coupes really better? Well, it depends where you live. I can tell you that I daily drove an XK8 for about 12 years and I never once thought about the convertible. I just thought to myself, I have got the coupe, this is what it is. Then I got a good deal on a convertible and that convertible is incredible. For me, the convertible was funner, especially if I'm going to take a blast on the highway in the middle of the night. Now, it's interesting because when the time came to sell my coupes versus convertibles, the coupes, I sold them within a week. So the coupes most definitely sell at a premium, but not just sell at a premium, coupes sell a lot faster. I don't see that changing. So if somebody has driven the XK8 for a lot of miles, find the nicest one that you can find, check the front bushings, and enjoy your new ride. Now, you know.
Groovy, baby.